Welcome back. It's a Friday afternoon, a little bit rainy today. This is actually my last day of my vacation during the week here. Obviously, there's still Saturday and Sunday left. But I'm glad I came back from camping this morning when it wasn't raining yet, because it was really nice the last couple days. So I'll have a link in the description below of my other channel, which I do have some footage from the actual camping trip. But anyway, today we're out here in the shed working on the pair of automatic wire cutters. I actually came in here this morning since it was a rainy day after I got done with the trip, like I said, just to work on this because I can't really offload the van and everything else with the downpour of rain. And I figured it would be a good day to tackle the project. Now, where I last left off, I was taking the coating off these pieces. You could see I got all of it off in pretty much every nook and cranny. There were some spots that were harder to get. I do have some sandpaper. I think I might give that a go before I paint this. But I used the wire wheel set into my Shopsmith 10ER, which is this old vintage piece of hardware here. And then I also used a wire wheel on my Dremel. And of course I had gloves, and they're not pictured, but safety glasses as well. Since I don't know what kind of metal this is, but I'm assuming there's some lead content in there, so have to be careful with that. Also, I did have both doors in here open, as you could see. I'm pretty close to them, so ventilation wasn't an issue. And of course, I kind of sit back far enough just to make sure. Also, these pieces here were sitting in a solution of WD-40, just sprayed on it, and I kept spraying on every couple days as it dried out. And the bottom of this plastic tin here was actually full of rust particles everywhere. So I wiped everything out, wiped the pieces off as best as possible. And there is some surface rust still on here. Now I'm going to use the wire wheel in the Dremel tool, and I'm going to hit all these up and just clean them off real quick. And I also had the pieces over here kind of in a dry fit to see what pieces need to move against the other pieces to find out where I should paint and where I shouldn't paint. I want to try to leave the surfaces that obviously mate against each other as clean as possible, and it turns out there's quite a few of them in here. Now I don't think they were all clear. I think just the insides here were, but the outsides weren't. So I have to experiment and see which has the best clearance, because I don't want the paint coming off. But it would make sense to at least clear the paint off after it dries. Now I am going to paint in here today. I do have some spray booths that I made. These are just out of cardboard. I'm going to set them up in front of the machine here and just give it a quick couple blasts, just to get to my cabinet here, figure out what color paint I want to do this with. I actually have silver paint, and I thought that'd be kind of cool to leave this shiny like that. It would give it a chrome look, but I don't know if it'll take to it. I mean, I guess I could try. But ultimately, the bottom part of the handles here, that's going to get dipped in Plasti-Dip once the stuff sets. So what I plan on doing in this particular video is exactly that. I'm going to get this painted. I'm going to get all this cleaned of the rust. And then once that's done, I'm probably going to soak this in more WD-40 just to keep it, from further rusting while I'm working on this stuff. Then once the paint dries, I'll come back and show you the status of both pieces here, and then we'll go through the process of Plasti-Dipping the handles, and then we get the fun task of figuring out how this goes back together. I was just like I said, doing a dry fit over here, and the way the handles orient back this way or this way really makes a difference. Just some clues, like there's this one piece here that the other one doesn't have. So I have to go ahead and either look back at the other video to see if I have any clues, or it's a puzzle. We'll figure it out as we get to it. I mean, there wasn't any real way to disassemble this without taking it apart piece by piece and marking them all down, which I didn't do. But I have a pretty good idea. I know how everything goes. It's not terribly complicated. For example, these 4 screws here hold in these pieces here, which these move in or out on. The spring here goes with this piece here. The pins, they belong with these linkages. The spring goes between the nubs up here, which is obvious. So it'll go together. It's going to be a trial by error piece for sure, but that's okay. That's how you learn how things work, and then ultimately, I'll know better, exactly how this thing works, what actuates what. It'll be a learning experience for myself too, which is great. But let me go ahead and get the dirty bits done here, and we'll be back when it's all nice and finished. Here's a quick little preview. You can see the old rusted piece on the one side and the newer shiny piece on the other. I cleaned up pretty nice. Well, those things wear out fast. Well, I guess it's a trip to Lowe's to pick up a couple more of these little heads on here so I can get the job finished. I was waiting for the wife to come home since she was on a little shopping errand. Now that she's here and we got the groceries offloaded, I'm going to go have a quick dinner and then I'm going to take a ride. And I'll probably pick up a different color paint. I was actually thinking of doing these red, since most of the tools I have on my desk have red, either handles or some part to it. I would actually dip the handles in red if I had red Plasti-Dip readily available to me, but that I don't, unless I want to spray it, and it takes a lot of spray to get the dip. But anyway, I digress. I did actually start assembling in this just a little bit, just from my own curiosity, because I'm dying to see how this gets put back together, and I think I've stumbled upon a lead. But with that, I'm going to go inside, eat, and take a quick ride, and we'll be back, like I said, once I have everything painted up here. Going to go with Rust-Oleum Sunrise Red. Also got a new wheel, and I also got these conical shaped ones too, just so I can get into some places I couldn't get before. A little update: I managed to get a couple coats of paint on. Some of the parts I painted black, some I painted red. Basically the body pieces were painted in red, and any of the support pieces like the linkages, stuff like that, they were all done in black. You can see I did the spring. A note about this metal: it seemed like it had a coating on it. I don't know if it was powder coating or not, but I don't think it was paint either, because when I sanded it off, it came off and you could tell it was definitely some kind of a coating. And now the paint's on it, while it does look good, there are some pieces where there's movement involved, and the movement is a little off now because of that, and I expected that because of the thickness of the paint and whatnot. So some of those areas I'm going to go ahead and scrape the paint back off of, so it's back to bare metal. But like I said, I anticipated that. You can see I kind of have it just dry fit together. Now this is just the body pieces, this isn't any of the other hardware. Some of these pieces look better than others, but that's, I guess, just the nature of it. These guys here, while they don't move, something does move up against the inside of it, so I will have to do that, just sand it off real quick. Also, when it comes to painting and drying, I'm a little bit impatient sometimes. You're supposed to put your coats on, minutes apart. And actually, I'll show you over here how I had this set up. I have two spray booths. This is just a little cardboard booth, and I would take turns running this in and out and just spraying it. And you can see from the tape marks here, I would basically just take the tape, sticky side up, stick this part to it, and then tape the tape down. And then when it got a couple coats on it and dried, I actually did that overnight. This morning I turned it over and taped the other side. Now you can actually see this is the side that I put tape onto. I really should have waited a little longer. I mean, the paint was dry and it was able to be handled, but I should have waited for the tape. But that's the side I'm gonna have to sand off anyway, so not a big deal. But that's gonna look nice. And actually I had one set up for the red paint too. That one was different because I had to hang the pieces. There were little holes that I could thread the string through and just hang them in there. And then obviously, because the way the part was hanging, like let's say downwards like this, the bottom half didn't get paint on it. So I had to actually, the next day, tape it to the side of the box with that, part sticking up. So for example, the bottoms here had to get touched up. The inside, actually the top part here, because this was hanging upside down, that had to be retouched. Certain things like the handles didn't really matter because they're getting Plasti-Dipped anyway, but there are some other parts that I wanted you to be able to see the paint nicely on it. But all in all, it came out pretty good. There was a little oopsie right here where it actually came off the tape mount that I had and actually landed the wet side down. but that's one of those faces that have to get cleaned up too, so not a big deal. And I started grinding off inside here. I don't want to take the nut out now, but all the mating faces in here are nice. And also I will admit that I spent a good half an hour last night before I painted up all the parts here, just kind of doing a dry fit just to see if I can get this thing to go together. I can. It's just a little hairy. You have to kind of put it together sections at a time and then mate the two sections together. And then there's this little extra clip piece here, which I'll discuss when I get to it, that makes it a little difficult. But not terribly hard. It's just something that you have to kind of put together easily. But nevertheless, I did get it together, and I ran it through a couple test strips, and it worked pretty damn good. But now that I have, you know, paint buildup in some spots here, I will have to clean that up so the parts slide together better. And also, I'm going to use some white lithium grease in between the moving parts, just to make sure they move nice and easily. I'll clean out, like, in the middle of these holes here. I'm going to run just a small file through there just to get back to the bare metal, because these pieces will ultimately ride on another piece. And the jaws, the actual piece that cuts the wire, I didn't paint those because I want those to be sharp as possible. So with that, I'm going to go ahead, do a couple things here, namely take this back apart, and I got to figure out a way to get this handle held stiff onto something that I can lower in and out of the Plasti-Dip. And one of the things I did was I took the chuck off the drill here, so I just have this little point, so I can actually attach something to this somehow and then use that to lower in and out. I do have an idea. This is a metal bar from inside of a printer, and it turns out that this actually is the exact same diameter as that metal stud right in the middle there, so I can hang the pieces directly from that. It's just a matter of how do I attach it. So I will have to rig up some kind of an apparatus here, but that's going to make it a lot easier to, you know, steadily dip this into the paint. So let me go ahead, cut the video now and get those pieces going, and I'll be right back. Here's a rather simple solution, but it looks like it'll work. I took the rod that I mentioned before, that was the diameter of the holes from the printer, and tied that to a piece of scrap wood that I cut to fit. I used wire. You can get this at dollar store. In fact, the Dollar Tree here locally sells it, and they come in little spools. There's 3 spools per package for $1, and I pick up a couple of them every time I go to the store because it always comes in handy, and I use it for situations like this. But I just passed that rod right through the holes on both handles here, and then the rear hole, I just drilled a hole in the piece of wood and ran the wire through and doubled up and tied it in place. There's one big hole here in the middle, and the way that's going to work is this is just sits over here, and then I take that piece there and thread it on from underneath. Of course, the drill press here is unplugged because I don't want this to turn on and come flying at me, but that'll hold these perfectly straight and downward at a 90-degree angle, so that the dripping on there is perfect. And I tried to line up a couple pieces of tape to get this, you know, to drip onto, because it will drip. Unfortunately, I had to redo the design here. Originally I had them hanging over from the top, and then I used this little nub here that the spring attaches to kind of hold it in place on the other side, but I didn't have enough distance because the bottom table here is adjustable, the top is adjustable, but I can only adjust the top if I lay it down, so I only have so much movement. And if I can get the can of dip over here, you'll see inside that the level is maybe about an inch from the top, so I can only go so far, and I want to be able to get that inch up to here. You know, I want this to be dipped in as far as possible, and I couldn't get that far when they were flipped over the other way. But this will allow me to get that can pretty close. I mean, it'll touch the top of the bar here, and I mean, it's not a thick piece, but there is some displacement here, so this liquid will creep up as you lower this down into it. But this kind of a rig will get me uniform results on both sides. Now it says here that I have to stir this first gently. Then you want to insert it 1 inch every 5 seconds, and then you want to withdraw at the same rate. So we're going to use the feet on here and just lower in. I don't have any gauges on here, so I'm just going to have to estimate 1 inch. Actually, I lie. There is a gauge right here. I can actually get a clock set up over here, and we can actually time it if we want. And then also, you have to wait 30 minutes between coats. So the idea is I'm going to take the can, put it in place, lower the product, the handle down into the product at that rate, 1 inch per 5 seconds, and then pull it out at the same rate. And then when I get the can clear, I'm going to slide it over to the next one, and I'm going to do that one. I'm going to mark the time down half an hour and come back. And I'm going to try to do this as many times as possible. Now it's already Saturday afternoon. I go back to work Monday morning, obviously, and then I try to have my next video up on Tuesday, which is what this is. So hopefully I can get quite a few coats in between now and the time this tool gets put back together. Also, since this takes a half an hour between coats, I'm going to start coating this now, and then in the interim, while this is getting ready to dry for the next coat, I'm going to work on getting the other pieces cleaned up, which are the linkages and stuff like that. And I'm going to obviously do that away from this area, so that way none of the powders and stuff that I take off will end up on the nice new handles. Hopefully this works well. I mean, I've tried this already on other tools. I've not tried it on tools that I've already painted like this. I might just go ahead and just give a quick, just dirty grind, just to take the gloss off of this, just to give it a little bit of a better surface to stick to. But I did want to have something there, not just bare metal. I felt that would have been better. So we'll see how it looks. But I'm going to go ahead and stir this up, attach this, get a first coat on, and I'll see how it looks. A little status update here. I did a dry fit of the actual head unit here. You can see I didn't mention before, but I painted the little tag here in metallic silver. It looks pretty nice. Unfortunately, paint on this isn't the best surface coating, and I know that. I knew that when I did this. You're not going to get paint to stick perfectly to it, and there's going to be spots like right over here where I had to drag the spring into position. Of course, that's going to tear up the paint, and I knew that. If I had a powder coating gun in a booth to do it and something to bake this in, I would love to powder coat it. I may just invest in one of those guns one day, and all you really need is a little toaster oven for something small like this. What I also did was, since I had this kind of dry fit together here, I sanded out the areas that I knew pieces were going to slide. For example, this inner piece right here, you can see it's kind of loose. That does move up and down, and this plane in here, having that sanded and clean like that, makes it a lot better. Slides a lot nicer. I also did the same treatment in here underneath. I'll have better shots of this once I'm actually inside, where I'm under my actual studio lighting on a tripod and everything. This is the cutting side that I mentioned I didn't paint, and you can see why. I wanted to keep those teeth nice and clean. I'm not sure how well this comes out on the camera. It looks pretty good so far in the viewfinder here, but those channels where the wire fits into there were pretty rusted, and hitting that with the wire wheel did a great job getting it nice and clean. Now, I did mention before I painted this, I kind of rough fit it together, and I figured out how to do it, which was good, and it works like a treat. And now that I painted it and had to sand some spots where it was rubbing, it works well again. Now, I do have the white lithium grease sitting in the tray here, so when I bring this inside, I'll do that there. These are the files that I mentioned with the iFixit tool set that I have. These have been coming in very handy for stuff like this, because then I can file in the fine detail areas between the Dremel tool with the wire wheel and those files. I think I did pretty good on this. Yeah, there's some spots where it's nicked up, but like I said, I knew this wasn't going to be a perfect coating, and it's certainly a hell of a lot better than it looked originally. And if anything, it gives it that worn in look. It's going to get beat up anyway. I just wanted it to be better than what it was, and obviously I'll keep maintaining this and making sure it doesn't rust up again. But yeah, you can actually flip this here You can see it does shut. This is a pretty interesting mechanism. I didn't realize how they worked at first, but now that I've been inside and out of this thing, I can definitely explain later on how this thing works. It's really cool. All I have to do now is just get a couple more coats on the actual handle pieces, which you can see hanging here. And this is the little apparatus that I came up with. Now I apologize, like I said, the lighting is not the best in here. I'm doing with what I have. But there's 5 coats on here, and you can actually tell that the levels here, hopefully you can tell, every time I put the water the thing in here, I say it's, I'm thinking water, it's like lines on a boat, you know, well, whatever. You can just tell that there's more than one layer here. The very first one's the first time I did it, and then every time you pull it out, there's more material that sticks to the actual handle, so there's less inside the bucket, so therefore the level inside the bucket drops each time, and that's why you get that level effect. Unfortunately, this particular one I bumped into a couple times while it was drying, so I kind of put a little knot at the end over here. As this dries, I'm actually able to form it just a little bit, and I can smooth it out. In between coats, it's looking better, but yeah, I keep hitting it, so that's a problem. I got to make sure I turn it out of the way when I'm not, you know, letting it dry. This side over here is coming out. See, I just did it again, clumsy. This side over here is coming out pretty well. You can see. Now there's little imperfections like air bubbles on there and stuff. They do tend to pop. I'm sure there's something you could spray on there to alleviate that, but if anything, you know what, that adds a little bit of grip, in my opinion, those little pockets. This isn't something I intend on using on live wire, so I'm not looking for that kind of insulation anyway. I just want something that feels nice in the hand. That's why I'm trying to get as many coats as possible, and that's why little things like just now when I bumped it, I don't really care about. You know, this thing's gonna look pretty sweet when it's done anyway, so it doesn't really matter. But now what I'm gonna do is just keep dipping this as many times as I can. My little apparatus is working perfectly. I just make sure I keep that out the way so that the feed arm here, when it loops around, it just clears it perfectly. And I can keep an eye on the gauge here, and this is inches, so every time I turn that knob, you can see that's the inch scale. So I can keep an eye on the time so I can get that 5 second per inch in. Also, I have my tablet running over here, timing me every 30 minutes so I can put another coat on. Try to get as many as possible. Now, I know some tools, they do this, and I think they have a second coat you can put on top that's really thick, and then you can put this back on as a last coat, and you have like an insulator foam. I'm not sure how that process works. I don't really have the knowledge or the tools to do that one. So it's not going to be like a really thick handle, but it's certainly going to be better than wrapped in electrical tape a few times. And I have to say, on a side note, when I went to buy the Plasti-Dip and some other things before I even thought about doing this particular project, I did take a look at a brand new pair of these, and they don't really make them like this anymore. I mean, it's the same concept. The mechanism's much different. They look like a pair of pliers. I know I saw one by that Irwin brand that they sell here in Lowe's, and for the money and for the time I'm putting into this, and you know, the can of paint, the Plasti-Dip, I already had the files, but you know, you get the idea. I could have just bought a new pair, but the idea is what's the fun in that? You know, I had these. They were part of my dad's collection, like I said. Who knows how long he had them, but if I can take care of them, I'm gonna have them for a long time too. I mean, I don't care if it's, you know, made in Taiwan. It's not like a Craftsman, a Snap-on. It's not like a name brand. Who cares? So what? A lot of these things are. I got these cheap, probably in Lowe's in a set, or who knows, Harbor Freight, somewhere I got them from. What difference are a pair of vice grips like this over ones that are like 3 times the price? Are they really that much better? You know, I know tools are worth it, but I'd make the argument to have any tool that's halfway decent if you can't have anything else. And then when you get money for a better tool, then obviously you can upgrade if you need to. Not everyone needs a $500 hammer, if you know what I'm saying, guys. Now we come to the crux of the project, and that's getting everything put back together. I'll show you a close-up. Now this was after 6 coats of the Plasti-Dip, and I could tell that by the lines up here. Now I mentioned that the way this was put on the actual drill press, when I lowered it in, I can only go so far, So as you put product on, the level in the container drops, and when you can only go so deep, you're going to go only so far. If I wanted to, I could do this one more time and dip it all the way down in and just clear these ridges here, but it's not a real big deal. Now this did put a really nice grip on this. You can see both sides came out very, very good. I did also mention that I cleaned out the areas where these pieces meet, as you can see. So there's some nice clean surfaces in there. I also used the round files in the hole there. And this is the last piece. I've had the whole thing put together this whole time, minus the two handles, because I wanted to wait for the paint to dry as best as possible. And yeah, even where I pointed out that I accidentally kept hitting into it, you could see the ends are perfect. That one final dip just really filled in all those little imperfections and made it really nice. So here's everything laid out. I'm gonna basically, I don't know the original names for all the parts, so I'm just gonna call them what I see them as. So obviously these are your handles. This is the body halves. There's a left half and a right half, and it's specific to which side you're using. So if we look at the left half here, this is the part that grips the wire, and you can see there's the teeth over here. Then there's also the top jaw, we'll call it, and that slides in and out. So the mating surfaces in here, I've went ahead and cleaned all the paint off of, and also this piece in here. And what happens is you take this linkage, this side faces out, and that sits, this hole sits in, it sits like this. The linkage sits on the end of this jaw is what I should say. Sorry. And when that sits on there like that, you can kind of get the idea what's going on. This this linkage here allows this to move in and out, and that will actuate that grab. Then you have the outside support piece, I guess I'll call it, and that's what sits on here, and that gets screwed in, and that just allows this to move inside. Now on that particular one, I didn't clean the mating surface off because there is enough clearance in there, and I'm going to go ahead and put the white lithium grease as I drop everything all over here. Now the lithium grease, I'm going to put just a little bit of it in here. I'm going to get a Q-tip or something, and I'm just going to put it on the inside of the track there and on here. There is already a coat of 3-in-1 oil because I was doing some experimenting. This little latch here I had to free up, and that was one of the reasons why I used the oil. I'm not going to use the oil though. It is nice and light and it will work. It's just I prefer the grease. Just it operates a little smoother to me, and it seems that the 3-in-1 oil likes to lift the paint off a little bit, so that's one of the drawbacks. That's pretty much the whole setup for the clamp end. The little linkage, by the way, which I just dropped on the floor here, is it's one-sided. It's got one large hole and one small hole. The small hole is what fits into the actual arm right here, and then there's just this little pin. Now I can tell you without any doubt, this pin is a pain in the butt. It doesn't sit anywhere in there but right where it belongs, and there's nothing to retain it. It just slides in and out. The only thing that does retain it is once this is actually put into the piece here, it can't come out because the body's holding it in place, but it can slide back and forth, and that's kind of a weak point. I'd like to find some way to maybe like hammer it just to peen the edge over to keep it from falling through. I'm not sure how I'm going to do that right now. I'm not in my outside shed, I'm back in the inside shed. I don't have any real heavy tools like that in here, but I might be able to get away with something. I really struggled trying to dry fit this together with that piece before, but I think I have a method down to putting this together that should make this a lot easier. So I'm just going to line that up over here. Screws, all this goes together. That's one side. So as you can probably guess by now, it's the same process on the other side, and you're not wrong. There's only one difference on this side is you have the jaws that do the cutting action. And this is the one I mentioned I didn't paint. I did get the rust cleaned out really nice. You can see the reflection of the light in there. It's nice and shiny. There's the top jaw and the bottom jaw. Now, there is the, probably won't see it on camera, but there are little tiny points and grooves in between those actual teeth there. And that's for lining them up to get them in there perfect. So I will have to finesse that a little bit. And the same thing happens, there's a little, outer storage, retention piece here. The metal inside here was just blued over and it was rusted, obviously. So painting it looks nicer. I went with the black instead of the red because, with the arms on here and the Plasti-Dip on the bottom, I figured that looked really nice. I mean, ultimately, if we had red Plasti-Dip, it would have looked nicer, but I digress. So the only other piece that's left is the stuff in the middle here, and this big spring just sits between the two posts here and here, and that's what keeps them outward. And then the coil here sits on the outside of the body, and that's what keeps that closed. Then this is the pin with the Phillips head screw on that side that slides through. It comes straight through the holes here and the holes up here. That's what lines that whole thing up, so that's your main hinge point. And that coil goes on the outside, and then it gets covered with this just metal cover here, and this has got the brand on it, that Best made in Taiwan. And this was the one I said I sprayed with the chrome paint. And then there's one of these, star washers, lock washers. They don't really do anything, but it's there anyway. And then the final screw. So the way I figured out this goes, we have to attach these pieces now, do this side now, get this going here with the links, and then apply that coil setup, apply the pin so we can get this middle put together, and then these slide in, and then when you slide the handles in, you'll have to actually back the pin out. So actually I'll have to save that for last now that I look at it, but these do have to get done first, then the handles, then the springs. So I'll go ahead, I'll assemble these pieces now, and I'll come back and put them in. Alright, I got the two top halves together. I can show you how they work now. The link, when you move this link up and down, that's what makes that jaw activate. And this is going to get pushed up by the handle. So you can kind of get an idea how this is working. And I also went ahead and put the grease on the inside here. You can kind of see a little bit of it sticking up. I've been using a toothpick here, a Q-tip, just going in and removing any of the excess, because you only need so much grease. But that's going to make that actuate nicely. Same thing with the cutting side over here. Also, those heads have been lined up nice. See, it's got pretty good motion. This was sticking pretty bad before when it was rusted out, as you can imagine. One thing to point out here, this little tab here, this is what actually locks the device up, separate, better way to describe that would be to show you like that. When this gets opened, that will stay open like that, and then when you release the handles, it kicks back open and shuts. Now the way to put this in the right way requires tension. There's a little spring right here, this little wire. There's nothing for that wire to rest up against. It's actually this piece right here. So when you mate the two of them together, you kind of have to line them up just right, and you'll know you got it because they'll sit like that open, and you'll have this hole lined up where that pin can just come through. So what I have left to do now is I'll pull these links out so I can show you. These handles have to get attached, and you attach them by bringing them up here, dropping this little pin through, and then kind of swiveling it into place, and you got to get them both to line up, and they'll connect in the middle. The pin gets through from the front, and then we'll put the spring on the back side when we get to that point. But I'm going to go ahead and do that, and while I'm here, I'll hit the insides of these surfaces up with a little bit of the lithium grease. Well, that was a little easier than I expected it to be. What I actually did was just put some grease into that slit there, so when I put the pin in, the pin didn't slide out immediately. And now that I have this in somewhat of a working condition, you can kind of get an idea, maybe more so now. When you squeeze these outer handles together, there's no springs on it right now, so it's kind of flopping in the wind, but you can get an idea that that's what closes those outside edges. And then when you get to a certain point, it splits. So I got to go ahead and put the spring in. That's pretty easy. You just, basically squeeze it into place. The back spring I will show you how to do, because that was a little confusing the first time I figured it out. Now you have to put tension on this, so we'll need a pair of pliers. But what you got to do is, there's a hole here. Let's see if I can zoom in on that. There's a hole right here, right there, and there's a hole right here. On the coil, there's two pins. There's the inner pin and then the outer pin. The inner pin is going to get put in first, then the outer pin is going to get brought into position. You can kind of see where the paint's already scratched up. That's from that dragging in. There's quite a bit of tension on this, so it is kind of hard to do, as can be expected. But what you'll need to do is get that middle hole put in like that. There's a little slit right here in this top plate. Come on, focus. There we go. You can see that little slit cut in the side there. That slit allows that rod to come out of the actual spring right here. So once you put that on, you put this screw through there, you tighten that guy up, then you can tighten the tension on that. So this, just like I said, just gets screwed in. And then to get the tension on here, you just grab the wire with a pair of pliers and just kind of force it into place. But this has to be in, because if it's not, that middle pin pops out every time. I tried this several times. This was the only way I could figure out how to do it. So that's my method. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to get this spring on there, and that's it. It's done. We can do some tests. Well, here it is, put together and operational. There's only one slight problem. The jaws don't stay open when you get to the outward position here. You're supposed to squeeze it. When you squeeze it, the two jaws tighten down. It separates to strip the wire, but they're supposed to stay open for a little bit as you close the or open the handles here. And what's not happening is the little lever here isn't engaging. And I'm trying to figure out now if it's lack of tension on the spring, or if paint or maybe the grease has something to do with it. It still strips. As we can see here, this is 18 gauge wire. I can go ahead and just put that in the outside edge here, and it strips perfect. It just it doesn't stay open. So I am going to take it back apart again and try to figure out that part of it. But you can see it, like I said, it works pretty well. I have other gauges of wire here. This is 22, which this goes all the way down to 22 here on the edge. The thing about this is the actual gripping head here doesn't engage all the way in, and you can see there's a little bit of overlap. They were like that before I started this endeavor, so there's nothing I can adjust. I mean, I'll take a look and see anyway, but you can see wire strip perfectly. I can go through all the different sizes, but I don't think it's going to make much of a difference. Now this does 8 gauge all the way up to 22 gauge, so that'd be 8, 10, 12, 14, 18, and 22. But what's kind of neat is 22 is on the very inside here, so it goes 22, then 8, 10, 12, 14, 18. So it's kind of strange how they have it lined up that way. But either way, it works, the way it's supposed to, other than that locking mechanism. So I'm going to go ahead, like I said, try to take this apart, see if I can figure that out. But I like what I see so far. I mean, it's got good motion to it. You can see, but it's supposed to make an additional click In fact, I'll show you. If I go ahead and open this up and then I push that lever down into position, you can see they're supposed to stay open for a little bit until you get to there, then they snap shut. So I'm waiting for that extra snap to happen, and it's not. Judging by how much pressure I have to actually push that down into position, I'm thinking it may have something to do with paint built up, or, you know, that spring. And I've already tried manually adjusting the spring from the outside here as best as I can with these long pliers, try to get in there and give it some more oomph, but it's not working. So that might have something to do with it. Now this did work. I will mention that it worked before I took it apart, and in the dry run before I painted it, and the dry run after I painted it, it worked. So I'm not sure why adding the handles on is making it not stay open now, but I'll get to the bottom of it. Oh, we have success. Yeah, it was just a little adjustment, and it's not something you can do fast. You have to kind of do it slowly, and you see it locks open. If you go too fast, sometimes it loses it. Well, maybe not. It's just one of those things. It was working intermittently. Now it seems like it's working all the time, so that's good. But yeah, that was a fun little project. Now I have a good set of automatic wire strippers here. I have a very good understanding of how they work. I've always looked at them and wanted to figure it out. Now I know. Probably know more about these than I'd like to. But if you enjoyed that particular series of videos, don't forget to give me a thumbs up. If you're not a subscriber, please subscribe. The continuing people who keep coming back to my channel to watch all these new videos, I'm amazed. Last time I looked, I'm almost had 190, which is just mind-blowing. Again, thank you for letting my channel grow, and grow more we shall. I have a ton of videos coming up. I'm trying to do it where I have more than one on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Obviously last Thursday I was out in the woods and couldn't get one uploaded, so this particular video you'll see on Tuesday, and I'll have another one as well to go with it. But again, thanks for watching.